we're going to talk about the anti-vaccination movement today, and actually some of the religious contributions to this, of course. And you're probably asking, okay, what's the big deal? Why hit this? Because obviously you don't have to be religious to be a victim of fuzzy thinking and think that vaccines cause problems. But you know, if you're already prone to believe in certain types of nonsense, then you know, hitching your wagon to the anti-vaccination movement is not a big step. So first of all, I want to make a point here that when I talk about the anti-vaccination movement, I'm talking about people who pursue non-medical vaccinations. If you don't vaccinate your kids for medical reasons, then you should be strongly opposed to philosophical objections to vaccinations because they put your kid at risk. And the second thing I want to talk about right up front here is there's a difference between under-vaccinated populations and unvaccinated populations. And in particular, under-vaccinated kids tend to fall in groups of people that either have no medical coverage or inadequate medical coverage, or their parents work all day or whatever and they just can't get to the vaccination clinic or whatever. So it's not that their parents are unwilling to have them vaccinated, it's just there's some barrier to getting them vaccinated. There are actually programs that help get kids their vaccines. So often it has to do with a parent's work schedule or some other reason why they can't get them vaccinated. And then there's the unvaccinated kids. Unvaccinated kids actually tend to come from more affluent households where the parents could get their kids vaccinated if they wanted to. But for whatever reason, they've bought into some of the claims of the anti-vaccination movement that the vaccines will harm their children. And the claims fall into a number of different categories. And of course, one of the first ones that came out a few years ago was the claim that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine caused autism. Excuse me. Originally, the claim was that it caused irritable bowel syndrome, and then later it was allegedly linked to autism. And that study was published by a guy named Andrew Wakefield. He was in England at the time, and his study, first of all, it consisted of a very small number of kids. The researchers who did this study later found out that the samples that he took, which he took biopsy samples from these kids' gut, and was looking for the measles virus. Later it was determined that the technique that they used to isolate the genetic material for measles virus was not appropriate. Didn't have adequate controls. It was actually contaminated in the lab. They used, as I understand it, they used a technique that was more appropriate for detecting DNA, and measles is an RNA virus, and so what they detected was actually a contaminant in the lab. Most of the study's authors later withdrew their name from the paper, and The Lancet published basically a retraction of the paper after it was revealed that he knew, in fact, that he had not detected measles in the gut. So, but this by then had sparked a whole series of fears among parents that if they gave their kid MMR, that it was going to cause them to be autistic. And about 2 years later, and this is where some of the religious stuff comes in. About 2 years after Wakefield published that paper, he published another paper which was entitled Measles, Mumps, Rubella Vaccine Through a Glass Darkly. Well, this is a reference to Paul's letter to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 13:12, which the gist of this is that science is interpreted by man, and therefore we can't be trusted to get it right. So all the science that refuted his conclusions, he's saying, is wrong. He got it right, everybody else didn't. So there's that link, and Wakefield is also linked with the Good News Doctor Foundation. When he first came to the U.S., he landed in Melbourne, Florida, and this Good News Doctor Foundation welcomed him in. They describe themselves as a Christian ministry that provides hope and information about how to eat better and feel better and minister more effectively as a result of biblically based healthy lifestyle. And
like not eating shellfish.
that must be it, because that's in the Bible.
Cool.
Wearing clothes of different fibers and all kinds of stuff, you know. So anyway, and that actually sounds like another show topic there. So anyway, so we've got Wakefield and his discredited MMR studies. That kind of set things off in England. That has since come here. In England, measles was under control. They had a very high vaccination rate. Measles is now endemic in England again. The vaccination rate fell low enough that herd immunity waned, and now it's endemic. So there are clear public health implications here. Last year in the U.S., we had a measles outbreak. I think there were like 135 or 34 or 35 cases in the U.S. last year. And I don't think I have the numbers here on the number of kids that were hospitalized as a result of that. But measles, of course, is not a benign childhood vaccine or childhood disease. The numbers I have, and this is straight from CDC, they have this mortality and morbidity weekly report, MMWR. And you can get all these numbers out of there, but measles historically causes 6 in 100 kids who develop it to have pneumonia. It causes encephalitis in 1 in 1,000, and 2 in 1,000 will die. Okay. And if you compare that to the MMR shot, the MMR has a risk of encephalitis or a severe allergic reaction. The risk is 1 in a million. Okay, so that's the risk that you take in getting the MMR. And interesting to note that there's not been a single documented death as a result of measles vaccination. So it has certainly prevented thousands of kids from dying since we've been using it, which has about a 40-year history in there. Okay, so that's measles. We also have a number of other vaccines, and I can talk about those in a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about some other quotes from people. And in particular, there's a quote from a Dr. Leonard Horowitz, who refers to vaccination as an ungodly practice. I don't know what his specific religious background is as far as what denomination, but he's basically saying that those who make, he's using a statement in Luke 13, chapters 1 through, or verse 1 through 5, that says, "Those who mix human blood with the blood of sacrificed animals are sinners." And so since vaccines are typically made using animal cell lines, when you inject them, you've now mixed human blood with animal blood, and that, of course, that's wrong. Now, of course, we've got objections to specific vaccines that some people have, and among those includes smallpox. Interesting thing about this, smallpox, when the World Health Organization was trying to eradicate smallpox around the world, one of the things that hindered the worldwide smallpox eradication campaign was in India, there's actually a smallpox goddess. And I'll probably mispronounce this. I believe it's pronounced Shitla. Shitla Mata is the Hindu smallpox goddess. And there were many people who said, no, if you get the vaccination, you're going to anger the goddess and you'll die anyway. And so that was a huge little pocket of resistance in an area where smallpox was endemic. So it was pretty important to penetrate that area.
I'm going to back up a second. He used a passage, and I had to look it up because I didn't remember off the top of my head, but he used a passage, Luke 13, 1 through 5, as an argument against vaccination.
This is that Leonard Horowitz did, yeah.
Okay. If you look up Luke 13, 1 through 5, I defy any of you to come up with any kind of interpretation that has anything at all to do with vaccination. What's going on there is people were talking to Jesus and said, hey, look at what Pilate's done. He's taken these Galileans, and after he's killed them, he's mixed their blood with the blood of their sacrifices. Mm-hmm. And Jesus' point there, when he's responding, is, well, who's the bigger sinner? Are these guys more unworthy? It's somebody had done something to somebody else that was insulting, And the discussion then carries from there as whether or not these people are less valuable, etc. There's nothing in there at all about, not even close to vaccination or any kind of order not to mix blood. I mean, surely you can find a better passage. I bet I can find a better passage in the Bible against vaccination before the show's over. Matter of fact, keep going.
Okay. All right. So we've got the Hindu smallpox goddess who hindered smallpox eradication efforts. Incidentally, her role has evolved. She's now the Hindu chickenpox goddess because we've eradicated smallpox. So.